Acorns are overlooked as a food source these days, maybe because they take a fair amount of effort to process and there's much more convenient food sources around. But they are a really good, reliable source of fats and protein, but they do contain bitter tannins which need to be removed for these to be considered edible, otherwise they can cause an upset stomach. So with acorns it's not just as straightforward as with some other nuts that can just be harvested and roasted, but in the UK it's quite difficult to get a worthwhile amount of hazelnuts and walnuts, which are taken by the squirrels before they're even fully ripe. But as you can see on masting years such as this, the acorns are just everywhere. I think it's well worth the bit of extra time and effort that it takes to process these, because you can easily collect enough for a good harvest. September and October are the months to be harvesting acorns, so head into your woodlands or even check along pavement. If you can find some big mature oak trees like this, then there'll be absolutely thousands of acorns underneath them. Select acorns that have a nice smooth brown shell like this, and avoid picking the ones with green shells because they're unripe. Avoid picking any acorns that have got a little hole in them like this, because the acorn will have been consumed by a weevil. And also avoid any ones that have got a split shell like this, or have already started to sprout. So the ones in perfect condition are like this, and they'll weigh roughly about the same as a pound coin, whereas any that are duds will be really light. The acorns of all quercus or oak species are edible once processed. I've only used English oak and sessile oak because they are by far the most common in the UK, but apparently some other species have less tannins in their acorns, so they're quicker to process. At home, check for duds by dropping them into a bowl of water. They should sink, and any that float are no good and can be discarded. Now leave the acorns out on trays and leave them to dry out for a few days. This makes it much easier to remove the acorn meat, otherwise it clings to the shells. The most efficient way I've found of removing the shells is to just go caveman style and hit them with a rock. Do it with enough force to crack the shell, but try not to completely crush the acorn. It doesn't matter if the meat stays in one piece or not, as we're going to chop them up. It's a time-consuming process, but I find it quite relaxing. It gives you a real sense of respect for our ancestors. Societies would have done this on a much larger scale, with the whole community helping out. If you have a little nibble on a raw acorn, you will see that they are unpalatably bitter. So now we need to leach the tannins. There are two options, cold water or hot water leaching, but either way you need to change the water several times. Cold water leaching takes considerably longer. It basically involves blending the acorns in water and soaking them for several days and changing the water to remove the tannins. I rarely use this method. It does make a better flour for binding, but as I mix acorn flour with plain flour, this doesn't really matter anyway. And as I rarely use this method, I won't go into detail about it here. Instead, I'll leave a link to Feral Foraging's video about it in the description. He explains it really well. So check that out if you want to make acorn bread. I prefer to use the hot leaching method. So chop up the acorns into pieces roughly this size. Then put the acorn pieces in a pan and cover with water and bring to the boil. Here you can see the changing colour as the tannins are leached out. Allow it to boil for around 5 minutes and then drain the water off. And then repeat this process 3 or 4 times. And then a final time, I cover with water and bring to the boil. Then take it off the heat and cover it with a lid and leave to soak for an hour. And then again, drain off the water. Have a taste of one of the acorns. As long as most of the bitterness is gone, then they'll be fine to eat. Take your leached acorns and lay them out on trays. And gently roast them for around 20 minutes at 150 degrees Celsius. I eat a lot of my acorns just like this, with a pinch of salt. They have a texture between hazelnut and Brazil nut, and they have a pleasant, slightly sweet flavour. You can use these roasted acorns just like hazelnuts. I like them mixed with other nuts into granola. Leave these roasted acorn pieces out overnight to make sure they are fully dried before storing them in a jar. For acorn porridge, make sure the acorns are completely dry and then blend them into a coarse powder. It's okay to leave a few larger lumps as they add a nice texture. Add 1 part acorn powder and 1 part porridge oats into a saucepan and add in 3 parts milk or plant-based milk and give it a stir. Cook on a medium-high heat until nice and thick. And if you like, you can add in a teaspoon of honey. This is a great way of adding some extra nutrients into your porridge. It adds a lovely texture and flavour too. If you want, you can just use acorn powder for making porridge instead of mixing it with oats. And I also like to add on some extra nuts and dried fruits. To make acorn flour, again, make sure the roasted acorns are completely dry. Blend them. And then pass the powder through a sieve. Any larger pieces that don't pass through the sieve can be blended again. As I used the hot leaching method on these acorns, this flour won't be any good for making bread on its own, but it can be added to other flours. My favourite use is to make acorn pancakes. To do that, you mix 2 parts acorn flour with 1 part self-raising flour and a pinch of salt, and give that a good mix. In a separate bowl, crack 1 egg and add some milk and mix. and then combine enough of the milk into the flour mix until you have a batter about this thickness. Add some into a pan and cook it on a medium-high heat. Once the pancake freely slides around in the pan, you'll know that that side is cooked. So then you can flip it over and cook the other side. Top with some bacon and maple syrup. This is a delicious breakfast. Also, if you have a cafetiere, you can make acorn coffee from this powder. If you want to store the acorns long term, then leave them in their shells. Lay them out on trays for several weeks to a month to ensure they are fully dry before storing them in jars. The tannins act as a preservative, so the acorns will last longer before they have been processed. Processing acorns isn't for everyone. It's quite a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it. If you're trying to live a more self-sufficient lifestyle, then acorns could be a really good source of calories for you.